James Whitey Bulger, a name that once struck fear into the heart of Boston, leader of the infamous Winter Hill Gang, responsible for countless murders, and a top FBI informant who played both sides of the law, but his reign ended behind bars after spending 16 years on the run from the police. In October 2018, he was transferred to Hazelton Federal Prison in West Virginia. Just hours later, he was found dead, brutally beaten beyond recognition. Was it an act of revenge, a targeted hit, or a failure of the prison system? South Boston in the 1930s was a place where survival often meant knowing how to fight, how to hustle, and how to stay ahead of trouble. It was in this world that James Joseph Bulger Jr. was born on September 3, 1929. The Bulger family lived in a small working-class neighborhood, their lives shaped by the struggles of the Great Depression. James, nicknamed Whitey for his shock of platinum blonde hair, was one of 6 children in the household. His father, James Sr., had been a hard-working longshoreman until an industrial accident robbed him of his livelihood. With a crippled patriarch and little money coming in, it was left to his mother, Jane, to hold the family together. She did so with an iron will, instilling in her children a deep sense of loyalty and self-reliance. But for young Whitey, discipline came less from his mother's teachings and more from the streets of Southie. As a child, Whitey Bulger was drawn to the excitement of the streets, where gangs of boys roamed, looking for mischief and opportunity. He was intelligent but restless, more interested in proving his toughness than excelling in school. He dropped out at a young age, preferring the thrill of petty crime over textbooks. It wasn't long before he was stealing, fighting, and making a name for himself as a kid you didn't want to cross. By his early teens, Whitey had already built a reputation for trouble. He ran with a crew of neighborhood delinquents, engaging in small-time thefts, armed robberies, and street brawls. The Boston police knew his name well, but while other boys saw jail time as a deterrent, Bulger seemed to wear his arrests like badges of honor. His early run-ins with the law only solidified his path toward a life of crime. At 18 years old, with a growing rap sheet and an undeniable reputation, Whitey Bulger made an unexpected move. He joined the U.S. Air Force. For some, military service was a way out of a dead-end life, but for Bulger, it was just another step in his education. The discipline of the armed forces didn't reform him. Instead, it refined his ability to manipulate and maneuver within a structured system. During his time in the Air Force, he was stationed in Kansas and later Louisiana, far from the familiar streets of Southie. But trouble found him even there. He was arrested multiple times for assault and disorderly conduct, proving that even in a uniform, he couldn't resist his violent tendencies. In 1950, the Air Force police even arrested him after going absent without leave. Bulger's military stint wasn't without its benefits. He learned how to handle weapons with precision, gained experience in evading authority, and expanded his network of contacts. By the time he was honorably discharged in 1952, he had a new level of confidence. More importantly, he had developed a keen sense of when to use force and when to use persuasion, 2 talents that would serve him well in his criminal career. Returning to Boston, Bulger found himself drawn back into the world he had left behind. But this time, he wasn't a reckless street kid. He was a man with a mission. Southie's criminal landscape was dominated by the Winter Hill Gang, an Irish-American crime syndicate run by Howie Winter. Seeing an opportunity, Bulger aligned himself with the gang, quickly proving his worth through his willingness to do whatever was necessary, whether that meant collecting debts, running extortion rackets, or eliminating rivals. Unlike other gangsters who relied solely on brute force, Bulger was calculating. He studied people, found their weaknesses, and exploited them. He understood that fear was a powerful tool, but so was loyalty, especially when it was coerced. By the late 1950s, he had established himself as a trusted enforcer within the Winter Hill Gang, and his influence was growing. It wasn't long before he was involved in high-stakes crimes, drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and loan sharking. But Whitey Bulger wasn't just another soldier in the gang. He had his sights set on something bigger. And with his mix of intelligence, ruthlessness, and strategic thinking, it was only a matter of time before he climbed to the top of Boston's criminal underworld. What Whitey didn't know then was that his rise to power would come with a dark twist. one that would make him one of the most notorious and controversial gangsters in American history. By the early 1970s, Whitey Bulger had positioned himself as one of the most feared figures in Boston's underworld. His mentor, Howie Winter, was sent to prison on federal charges, leaving a power vacuum within the Winter Hill Gang. Bulger, with his sharp instincts and unrelenting brutality, seized control, cementing himself as the new boss of the Irish-American syndicate, together with his fellow gang member, Stephen Fleming. Unlike many gang leaders who relied on muscle alone, Bulger combined intelligence with intimidation. In the mid-1970s, Bulger struck a secret deal with FBI agent John Connolly, a fellow Southie native. Under the guise of being an informant, Bulger fed the FBI just enough intelligence to help them take down the Italian Patriarca crime family while ensuring his own operations remained untouched. This arrangement gave him unprecedented power. With law enforcement effectively shielding him from prosecution, he operated with impunity, eliminating rivals and consolidating his control over Boston's criminal landscape. He earned a reputation as a ruthless killer, known for executing informants and disloyal associates. One of his most infamous murders occurred on May 11, 1982, when he ambushed Brian Halloran, a former ally turned FBI informant in Boston's Seaport district. Halloran was killed alongside an innocent bystander, Michael Donahue, who had simply given him a ride. In 1984, Bulger also killed John McIntyre, an arms smuggler who had attempted to betray him after a failed IRA weapons shipment. After brutally interrogating McIntyre, Bulger strangled him, shot him, and buried him in a shallow grave. Whitey Bulger's ties to the FBI were both a blessing and a curse. While it granted him protection, it also put him in a precarious position. By the late 1980s, the FBI began realizing the extent of Bulger's manipulations. It was clear he had been playing both sides, informing on rival Italian crime families while expanding his own empire unchecked. In 1994, the FBI finally turned on him. A federal indictment was issued, charging Bulger with multiple crimes, including murder, racketeering, and extortion. With a well-placed tip from his corrupt FBI handler, John Connolly, Bulger vanished. He and his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, went into hiding, launching one of the most infamous manhunts in American history. For years, controversy swirled around the role of the FBI in protecting Bulger. His informant status had allowed him to build an untouchable empire, while corrupt agents like Connolly ensured his survival. Connolly himself was later convicted for his role in assisting Bulger, a stunning fall from grace that underscored just how far the FBI had gone to shield one of America's most ruthless criminals. For 16 years, Bulger remained elusive, living under fake identities in Santa Monica, California. He and Gregg blended into their surroundings, posing as an elderly couple while avoiding digital footprints. Despite his efforts to remain hidden, the weight of his crimes ensured that law enforcement never stopped hunting him. In 2011, a renewed FBI campaign finally bore fruit. A tip from a former acquaintance led agents to Bulger's modest apartment. When they apprehended him, they found a man aged by time but still carrying the aura of a feared crime boss. Stashed in his apartment were 30 weapons, fake IDs, and $800,000 in cash. This was proof that even in exile, he was prepared for the worst. His 2013 trial was one of the most highly publicized in U.S. criminal history. Accused of 19 murders, among other crimes, he sat stone-faced as former associates testified against him. In the end, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 5 years. Prison, however, was no safe haven for the notorious gangster. On October 29, 2018, Whitey was transferred to United States Penitentiary, Hazelton, in West Virginia. Just one day later, on the morning of October 30th, the 89-year-old was found dead in his wheelchair. Bulger's body bore the brutal marks of an attack, beaten with a sock-wrap padlock and a shiv, his eyes nearly gouged out and his tongue almost severed. Law enforcement officials described him as unrecognizable. This horrific act marked the 3rd homicide in the prison in just 40 days, with Mafia hitman Fotios Freddie Gias believed to be behind the murder. This was the story of James Whitey Bulgar. Thank y'all for watching and see you in the next video.